how did you keep yourself from getting jaded and thinking, oh, another artist who, struggled with heartbreak or addiction or whatever? How did you stay curious?
All the bands that I've interviewed, if I was never a fan, there was always something about the project, about songwriting that you can get into their head about. And if I've never bought a Steppenwolf record and I'm interviewing John Kay, I know there's a huge fan base for Steppenwolf out there. So the interview is going to be for them, and they'll be happy.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Foundation, in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
I am amazed. Okay, so before we, hey, Ethan.
Hi, Mitch.
Hey, Ethan Shanty is in the studio with us. He is the producer on this fine program, Northwards, and he joins us before our interviews. And Ethan, I'm amazed that shirt you're wearing exists.
Oh, the Laura Palmer shirt? I literally just got it in the mail yesterday. You watched Twin Peaks?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was in college when Twin Peaks came on, and so that was like... There wasn't a lot of destination television when we were in college, but I have the Twin Peaks soundtrack on cassette, man.
I just got it on vinyl. It's awesome.
Angelo Baldamenti.
Amazing. Have you ever watched that video of him talking about how he composed Laura Palmer's theme song?
I have not.
Oh my! I'll show it to you after this. The first time I watched it, I was literally in tears because it's him talking about sitting at the keyboard with David Lynch, and David Lynch just sort of choreographing the whole scene that he wanted to paint and making Angelo play to it, and then conducting him through. It's awesome.
Wow.
So my girlfriend and I watched the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks after several false starts. It took me 4 tries to finally get into Twin Peaks because
it's pretty weird.
It's supremely weird, and just I wasn't prepared for it. And afterward, I had a lot of conversations with people and realized that in the same way that Cormac McCarthy often, his style of writing is very dense and it takes a lot to penetrate it, but also because so much of his work takes place in the American Southwest, there's a lot of Spanish-speaking characters, and he will just write in Spanish and not translate it for you. And he's just kind of it's...
Sorry, SOL.
Yeah, it's up to you. If you get it, that's great.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky that I took some Spanish in high school and college, so I can read some of it. But if you don't get it, well, then that's your problem. You got to look it up. And I think David Lynch is operating on a similar wavelength where it's just here's what I have for you. If you like it, take it. If not, that's on you. It's got nothing to do with me. And once I realized that, it made taking the show for what it was much simpler and much more
totally
entertaining.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It took me four tries to finally get through the pilot because it's so... Is esoteric the right word for it?
That's right. So your shirt, for people who are not in the studio with us as we're recording, is a promotional T-shirt that apparently ABC put out that says, "Finally, Saturday, November 10th, find out who killed Laura Palmer."
Yeah.
Really. I don't know whether... Is that actually a vintage shirt? Or
no.
They made that from a newspaper ad.
Yeah, so this was an ad that ABC put out, and then my friend Joey runs a bootleg T-shirt shop, and he's we were talking about money before we started recording, and he's very much an anti-capitalist, and he'll say the very first thing when you order a shirt is I hate money. His philosophy is a lot of the stuff that I'm into was came out earlier before I was born or into pop culture or whatever. And so I just wasn't aware of it or it passed me by. And so he's I always wanted to see this particular graphic or this particular comic panel on a T-shirt. And so I made it for myself and put out a few copies on the internet on Etsy. So people who have similar interests can also buy it, and basically just does it at cost. So once I finished Twin Peaks, he just coincidentally started up his printing shop again and put out these shirts, and I bought one for me and one for my girlfriend.
I was imagining somebody wearing that in 1991 or something,
right.
and being a walking advertisement.
Well,
and
now
then the shirt like ceases to be useful after November 10th.
right, yeah, and now I'm that walking advertisement for watching Twin Peaks on Amazon.
We mentioned the soundtrack to Twin Peaks, and that's probably this is why I'm a professional segue artist.
You're pretty good at it.
I was thinking because we're going to talk about music and music videos on this episode of Northwards, and you seem like you are in the perfect generation for music videos to have had some influence on the kind of music that you were exposed to, listened to, interested in?
Definitely. I think that I'm kind of like on the tail end of when music video channels were like relevant before they started transitioning to all like reality programming. So yeah, I guess I was probably like 10 or 11 when my family got satellite. So that's about the time that I started, in addition to watching like all of the 15 Stars movie channels. And recording the movies I liked onto VHS.
Stipulate stars with a Z.
Yes, stars with a Z. That's right, in Espanol. So we had a couple of music channels. There was MTV. There was MTV2. There was briefly we had Much Music. We had Fuse. We had VH1. We had VH1 Classic. Wow, we had a lot of them. I used to watch Pop-Up Video on VH1 Classic.
Pop-Up Video on VH1 Classic.
We would watch hours of that as a family. That's so weird. I totally blanked that out of my mind.
I'm imagining the Simpsons all together on their couch.
Exactly, yeah. And like, I can't even imagine why my dad was watching it, because he was not a fan of like 80s pop music, which is what VH1 Classic was playing at the whatever. Anyway, yeah. So I think I'm of the generation that's at sort of like the tail end of the relevancy of music video channels from the time I was like 10 or 11 until I was like 17 or 18. And at that point, like, I had started downloading music illegally on Kazaa and LimeWire and stuff. So I was really finding my own taste there, and then, went off to college and didn't have cable there. So yeah, I discovered a lot of artists through video channels. Much Music, MTV2, Fuse, Jimmy Eat World was one of them that I still listen to. Chevelle was one of them that I listened to. I was also watching TRL after school like every day for a long time, and that was mostly pop music. But there was a period where they were having like new metal stuff, which I liked at the time, or pop punk like Blink-182. So yeah, I would say that that era of music and music video television kind of informed the way that I think about music promotion today, even though it's not really relevant, but it still resonates because it's, my band puts out music videos and, we put out records and stuff. Obviously, I can't separate myself from that too much. It's ingrained in me.
It's interesting to think about how the existence of music videos on TV is all but gone.
Yeah.
But now the truth of the internet is that you can watch pretty much whatever band's videos you want at whatever time you want, but you're not discovering them in the same way that something like MTV or Much Music or VH1 would have allowed you to, where you're just sitting there and watching a stream of videos like, what's this?
Yeah, it's like curated in that way.
Right.
Well, sort of curated, because like the barrier for entry was pretty high.
Yeah.
There's a reason that, music videos used to cost millions and millions of dollars to make, because it was the big promotional tool that everybody used to get their music out there. Now you can make a music video. We can make a music video right now on our phones and put it on YouTube and maybe get millions of views. But it's not that curated experience. Like, nobody's walking you through it. We talk about that a lot at work here and in my personal life, about how, the reason our music shows on North Country Public Radio are so like well respected and coveted and like almost like appointment listening is because like there's a person who is showing you their taste in music and talking about why they like it, and you're probably tuning in because you like that. And in the same way that like when you tune into a certain block of MTV or a certain program on MTV2, it was because like, oh, MTV2, like Headbangers Ball is going to have this hour of music, of metal music that I can't really find anywhere else, and I'm probably going to be exposed to a band that now I love. And yeah, you don't really have that anymore. The algorithms feed you stuff.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's not as fun.
And I, to this day, feel like I missed out on something because we didn't have cable until I was probably a sophomore or junior in high school. And you know, by the time we got cable, I had other things going on, and you know, once in a while I would turn on VH1, and they were invariably playing a Michael Jackson video because they played Michael Jackson videos every third video, I think.
Yeah, I think they were legally obligated to.
Exactly.
They'll pull their FCC license.
Up until that point, though, my only real exposure to music videos was when we would visit. There was a 2-year period in the early to mid '80s when we would visit my grandparents in Boston, and there was an actual over-the-air video music channel there that I think only existed for like 2 years.
Oh.
In fact, there's a documentary. It was called V66. It was Channel 66.
Oh, never heard of it. Obviously, I've never heard of it. Yeah, it's around for 2 years before I was born.
And I remember only two. I only remember 2 videos. Although I'm sure if you showed me some videos from that era, I would remember having seen them. But you know, I would go off to bed in the guest room where I slept, and there was a little black and white TV in there. And I remember turning on V66 and watching. And I remember the "Life in a Northern Town" video by the Dream Academy.
Can you sing it? I don't know what that is.
Hey, yeah. Somebody
That's
samples.
what that's called?
Yeah, that's called "Life in a Northern," and somebody samples that now. I can't remember what song it is, but it's there's like a current pop song that samples.
Oh, really?
That. Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember the video from Phil Collins' "In the Air Tonight," which is mostly just his head. I remember.
Really? I was going to say you don't have to sing that one. You can do the drum solo if you want.
My son, who is 16, and really should have no knowledge of Phil Collins,
right.
But knows that song primarily for the drum solo.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, who doesn't? It's
yeah. I'm amazed what teenagers are into. It's like they all know Phil Collins for "In the Air Tonight" just for that drum break.
Listen, times change, but a sick drum solo is always a sick drum solo.
I remember, don't worry.
Do you have a favorite music video?
Oh, do I have a favorite music video? That's a great question you ask. Let's listen to this interview, and then we'll come back, and I'll tell you what my favorite music video was or is.
So you want to get us into it?
Oh, I shouldn't I?
Yeah.
You know, a few weeks ago, we had an interview with a filmmaker from Kingston who did this sort of semi-documentary, semi-fictionalized memoir or film adaptation of a memoir of this former VJ from the Canadian music channel Much Music, a guy named Bill Welychka, who is very much a real live person who does live in Kingston. And the film, as I say, fictionalizes his sort of downward spiral and attempt to get back into the music business in various ways. And it was an interesting film to see. It was an interesting interview with a filmmaker, and I came out of it thinking, well, geez, why don't we interview Bill Welychka himself?
Yeah, go to the source.
And so I looked him up. Actually, I had the filmmaker connect me with him. And we have Bill Welychka on the line with us now. Bill Welychka, it is a real pleasure to talk with you. Thanks so much for making time.
Oh, my God. Thank you so much. That means a lot. It really does, especially across the border. I have relatives in the U.S. My ex-wife was from Nashville or Texas originally. So, yeah, I've spent a lot of time in the U.S. and love our U.S. neighbors.
So sitting here in 2025, a good, 35 years after your career started, your professional career started?
I started when I was 9.
Yeah, exactly. How do you view your contribution to the world of music?
Oh, my God. The right place at the right time. I know we've all heard that before, and it's somewhat true, but my contributions, I like to think, was the conduit between the viewer and who I was interviewing or who I was spending time with. And basically, I'm there for the viewer, and I always appreciated the viewer to be there to watch and hopefully be entertained, maybe learn a few things, but also there for the subject, the interview subject, whether it's Madonna or Dave Grohl or Mick Jagger or a local musician. It doesn't matter. They have a message, and I'm sort of there to get that message out, to convey it to the viewer and ideally answer any questions a viewer might have about that artist's project or life or history or anything fascinating. And to do it with originality, hopefully, and to do it with paying attention to all sides around me, including my own curiosity.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, and it seems like people don't necessarily consider what a powerful position you're in. Powerful, like maybe a lowercase p in this case. But, when you think about the people who watched you over your years at Much Music and Much More Music and in your other roles as well, there's a pretty reasonable chance there are musicians that they are listening to today that you are responsible for introducing them to.
That is a huge compliment, one of the biggest compliments. I put out my autobiography a couple of years ago, and a second edition came out last month just because so much has happened since the book's initial release and now, and that includes lots of interviews and book tours. One of the things that I found on the book tours were complete strangers telling me, recounting an interview that I had totally forgotten about that I had done with Liz Phair. And because of my passion for Liz Phair and showcasing some of her music and videos, they fell in love with Liz Phair's music and to this day are huge Liz Phair fans. And that's happened many times, not just on the book tours, but over the years. I think my sense of passion for certain artists, my love for certain artists and respect for certain artists always shined through the interviews. And I've had people say, oh my God, I became a huge Cure fan because of you, or I became a big fan of Oasis because of you, or I had no idea Dave Grohl was so incredibly sweet. Or, wow, is David Bowie so smart? I had no idea. Little things like that. And yeah, when someone says that they became a fan of a certain artist because of being exposed to maybe one of my interviews or specials, that's when it hits you and you think, wow, it was more than just a great job traveling the world. I had some kind of influence. All I did was interview rock stars for a living. And on the book tours as well, I heard from a lot of people. I was their babysitter growing up, which freaked me out. Don't blame anything on me. But just that idea, like kids would go home to watch MTV. Kids in Canada would go home to watch Much Music. And, that's how we learned about new videos and new artists and be exposed to new music. Sadly, that doesn't happen anymore. And what MTV did for the States and what Much Music did and Much More Music did for Canada, sadly, is a time that will never be recreated. I'm glad I grew up when I did, because I would go home and watch Much Music from school.
Well, yeah. So for people growing up today on either side of the border, people who can literally bring up any song they want or any music video they want practically whenever they want on a screen they carry in their pockets. Can you describe why networks like Much Music in Canada and of course MTV and VH1 in the States, why were they such a big deal at the time they were?
There was nothing else like it. In the UK, they've had music shows around since the 60s. Yeah, we have the CBC, our sort of national broadcaster, had music shows in the 60s and 70s. American Bandstand, huge in the U.S. in the 70s. And Don Kirshner's rock concerts, I remember watching as a kid. Howard Cosell even had a music program which introduced the Bay City Rollers to America and launched Roller Mania. And I remember grade 3, I think, watching that and being really drawn to live music and how it was directed and the noise and the screams and the lights. And so music television has always been there. But what Much Music and MTV initially did when they launched was bring it into your living rooms 24 hours a day to all ages. And that was really cool. I think what Much Music started to do is take a page out of MTV's book, and that is hard to do ratings for sponsorships and for clients when people are constantly tuning in and out. That's what happens. So I don't like that video, move on to something else. Oh, I'll stick around and watch this video. Or you leave it on for a half hour as background noise. It's hard to rate in terms of 15-minute and demographics, who's watching when. And so MTV realized a long time ago with Beavis and Butthead and reality shows and game shows, people tune in half-hour intervals. And so that's how we're going to be presenting our programming, with a beginning, middle, and end. And Much Music adapted that sort of delivery of product. And in that process, sadly, music started to take a back seat to the corporate side of things. But it's true. And, music videos, 3 hours of music video flow with the occasional live interview thrown in there. That presentation of music has sort of fallen by the wayside, and that's sad. And I know people love that format because, well, maybe I'm contradicting myself, but when I put together an hour special with Shania Twain or whoever, Kiss, Def Leppard, I don't know, pick one. It is beginning, middle, and end, but it's music related, and you're getting music video clips in there. You're also getting interview clips throughout the years. And, some of the things that I've uploaded to YouTube over the past 10 years, thousands and thousands of views and hits. So there is a desire to watch music, I think, still.
And I think the other thing is that today people can kind of create their own Much Music or MTV, because you can pull up a music video on YouTube and it'll recommend the next music video, and you could just sit there and essentially recreate what MTV and Much Music were like 30 years ago, and an algorithm will cater to your whim, which might be good in a way, but also doesn't necessarily allow you to be introduced to somebody the way you were doing it on a network where there was a human being saying, okay, we're going to air this after this, and then this comes next.
I'm guilty of doing that, sitting there and, having some drinks on a Friday night and starting off with one music video. And then, an hour later, I've watched a whole bunch of them. And that's, how I sometimes consume new music. So I am not crapping on YouTube or streaming or anything like that. I discovered J.J. Wild through streaming, who's a Canadian female singer-songwriter. She loves rock. She loves to rock. She's got a kick-ass band. And when they came through Kingston a few months ago, I was just like right at the front going, oh my God, this is so amazing. Where are artists like this? And they're out there. And so that's how new artists are being exposed. But what I miss is that live edge to a live interview. Sometimes with the studio audience, sometimes not. I found over the years, interviewing Janet Jackson one-on-one in a quiet environment is great. Interviewing her in front of 100 people in a loud room is great too, except, there's a different energy. But sometimes when the artist will respond to a question, everyone's clapping and screaming, that it sort of actually takes away from what that artist is trying to say in many ways. And so the sound bites become a lot smaller. You can't get into as heavy or deep subject matter when there's a live studio audience always screaming. Depends on the artist. I've had artists do a live show with a live studio audience, and we're taking fax questions. Yeah, I'm dating myself. Email questions, live phone calls, and they're deep and they're thoughtful, and and the audience is listening, and that's the best audience. Or when Noel Gallagher from Oasis is making jokes and the audience is laughing, that feeds him and he becomes more entertaining and more funny. Yeah, I miss that kind of presentation.
One of the things that struck me in reading your book is the way you write about it. It sounds like a lot of the musicians that you talked to responded differently, maybe even more positively to you because you were with a Canadian network. And we're not just talking about Canadian bands, but there seemed to be something that people responded to about you're not necessarily being, and I'm not putting words in your mouth here, not MTV wasn't wasn't the evil empire necessarily, but
Oh, of course
there was
not, no.
but there was a different energy that people brought to, at least some of them brought to their conversations with you when they found out you were Canadian.
I've heard it said from many artists, Canadian artists who have toured the U.S., American artists who have toured Canada, international artists who have toured both countries. It's been said more than a few times. It's a pleasure to, of course, anyone being interviewed anytime. It's what an honor. You're getting your story out. You're getting your information about your project out to as many people as possible. But I think rather than, what's your favorite cookie? What's your pet dog's name? I get off on interviewers who are a little bit more engaging with their time. And hopefully, and one of my goals was in any interview was sometimes, Tina Turner is going to be doing 10 interviews in one day. Well, I have 20 minutes with Tina Turner or Phil Collins or whoever. I want my interview to stand out to them. I want my experience or their experience with me anyway, to be looked at as in a very special moment where they can, think going back and thinking about that day, that long ass press day. Oh, that Bill guy. Yeah. He did his homework. That was a great interview. I hope my fans in Australia will see that because I said some things I've never said before. Yeah, that was always a huge goal, and not to pat myself on the back because that's lame. That was always a goal. And when an artist would express that, it would be like, okay, I'm on the right track. And, for Duran Duran to say, you just gave us one of the best interviews in my career. Like, what a badge of honor for any broadcaster to hear that. And I've had great teachers simply by watching interviews over the years. There's nothing more than that I would hate more than an interviewer asking a question and then immediately look down on a piece of paper to get their next question ready, missing what that person just said, which deserved a friggin' follow-up, or interviewers cutting off, the interview subject, or putting themselves in the interview where they think they're a star interviewing a star. And I've heard on-air people refer to themselves that way, and that repulses me. And so that's sort of my approach to things. And I think that's why I was never really hated or despised. I mean, you can't make everyone happy all the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, you must have had occasions where it was hard to cut through that facade or whatever it is, the thing in an artist who is having a media day and doing 10 interviews in a row, and you can almost see them rifling through the index cards in their mind and saying, oh, this is answer 14G, and get them to be present with you.
Oh, and it's happened many times. And then there's a moment in most interviews like that where something is switched. You'll ask something and you'll see their eyes sort of, take on a different energy, and their body language sort of becomes a little bit more closer to you, or all of a sudden they're smiling or laughing, and you realize, okay, like you say, you have to maybe dig a little deeper or sort of do a little dance to get to that point. But when that point happens, it's the greatest feeling in the world. I love that feeling.
Me too, honestly.
Then you can just sort of sit back and go, okay, nice. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a soundbite. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's another good soundbite. This is what, and you're an editor. I'm sure in your head as the interview's going along with me, especially if I'm, doing an interview that I know is going to be turned into an hour special, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. In my head, I'm thinking, okay, I could put that there, bring in that video. Yeah. Oh, okay. What they just said. Yeah. I'll do a montage of that and then bring in what they just said there. Oh, and that thing they said earlier, I can move that over here. Yeah. Like all that's going on as well as listening, as well as talking.
Oh yeah. You're trying to like maintain it as an organic conversation, even though in your head that as organic as it is, it's going to look like this when it hits the air.
Yeah, and I know there are people watching thinking, wait a second, did you just say that you do interviews and you edit and produce your specials? I wouldn't want it any other way for the most part. And I know from an economic standpoint in terms of television, most stations in a situation like that would send, their on-air host Okay, cameraman, maybe a producer, maybe someone to do lights and audio. We always traveled light, usually in a situation where, like, I don't know, go to Australia, interview Bush, go to Texas, interview George Strait, go to Switzerland, interview Shania Twain. It would be me and a camera person. And so when I'd come back with the tapes, in that case, from the camera person, I'd screen everything, paper edit an hour special, edit the hour special, and therefore produce it, take it to post production. In some cases, handed the master to master control to play. So, yeah, we did it out of economics, I think. For the most part, it's a lot cheaper for that station to send two people as opposed to three or four. But I wouldn't want it any other way. A little bit of a control freak, I guess. But also, in my head, like I said, I'm editing a really good special in my head as it's going down.
Of course, sometimes you show up to interview Madonna and find out that you needed to have a monitor with you.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's in the book. What an awkward day that was. Yeah. It's a very long story, but yeah, if anyone's ever going to interview Madonna, please don't forget your monitor. She really wants to see the shot and will not work without seeing the shot. Luckily, it was at her house and we're in Hollywood, so we got a monitor delivered very quick. And she wasn't in a good mood either. But then I interviewed her like a year later or something, and she was so sweet and giving, and yeah. And you read the book. I'm very honored. Yeah.
And probably a good thing you weren't doing the interview in Brockville or something, because finding a monitor would have been a little more challenging.
But there's a will, there's a way. Maybe go to the local cable station. Go, guys, I need to borrow a monitor real quick. But she's Madonna. She has the right to be to approve the final shot. I blame the record company guy for not telling us.
So I'm imagining you in a record store in, say, 1998. And by then, it's a record store and a CD store and whatever. But I could imagine you in the racks of a record store looking through them and saying, yep, interviewed them, interviewed her, interviewed them, interviewed him. It's one thing for the artists to come out of their shell in their interview with you as you have used your skills as an interviewer. But how did you keep yourself from getting jaded and thinking, another artist who, struggled with heartbreak or addiction or whatever? How did you stay curious?
That's a really good question. First, yeah, I have friends that like to sit around if I'm at a pub. Okay, John Bon Jovi, yeah, 3 or 4 times. Eric Burdon from the Animals, yeah. Just REM, yeah. Just... They love to do this game where, Foreigner, yeah. Pat Benatar, thinking they got me, yeah. But it was always, I know I'm a music fan first and foremost. And, I've interviewed Marilyn Manson a few times. I'm not necessarily a fan of his politics or his lifestyle or his choice in whatever or however he manages to communicate. But I love his music. I think it's great music. Again, I'm not a big fan of his, but there's always something to gravitate towards anybody. I've interviewed bands that I don't go home and listen to. There was a period where I was interviewing boy bands for about 2 years consistently and every day. And I don't listen to the Backstreet Boys or NSYNC or whoever, New Kids on the Block. And they just kept adding and adding and adding to this long list of boy bands. But there's something interesting about everyone. One of the things about the Backstreet Boys is I became, at one point really close to Howie Doro because from the Backstreet Boys, just because he was just a nice guy and those guys worked their asses off. And there's, and his story is interesting. All the guys, like I said earlier, everyone has an interesting story. So that's what you sort of like to find and zero in on. And, again, all the bands that I've interviewed, if I was never a fan, there was always something about the project, about songwriting that you can get into their head about, I think. And if I've never bought a Steppenwolf record and I'm interviewing John Kay, I know there's a huge fan base for Steppenwolf out there. So the interview is going to be for them, geared toward them, and they'll be happy.
The problem with doing an interview over Zoom is you can only see a little corner of somebody's room. How big is your record collection or your music collection?
It used to be huge, I will admit. In the past 10, 15 years, whenever I've moved, I've sort of really have stood in front of stuff and go, okay, when was the last time I listened to this? Ooh, never. Okay, I'll give that away. It's sort of downsized over the years, and like everyone else, and I have a lot of stuff on my phone. But one of the things that I do still embrace, I bought 3 CDs a couple months ago. We have there's a store here in Kingston. It's an independent record store, and they sell vinyl. They sell CDs still. But I was there maybe 2 months ago, and I bought 3 CDs that day. The Cure's new one, J.J. Wild, and a new Tragically Hip re-release. And I went home and I poured over the liner notes. I went downstairs to the basement where my Blu-ray player is hooked up to my TV, and I listened to these over the weekend. And well, that's what I miss. That's what I love about music, is that the liner notes or the artwork. And I was doing that when I was a kid.
You mentioned just a second ago that one of the CDs you bought was Tragically Hip reissue. And I wanted to ask you about the Hip because a couple of things strike me. One is that you were present for this really momentous point in Canadian music history as the Hip played their last show together. And at the same time, I'm talking to you. I'm just on the other side of the border. We were talking about this at the radio station today, that there's probably a very narrow window along the U.S. side of the border where there are fans of the Tragically Hip. But you get much beyond, Buffalo or the area that we're in the St. Lawrence Valley. The further away you get from the border, the less people know them. Can you give us, as American listeners, and we still have lots of listeners in Canada, but as American listeners, your best pitch for the Tragically Hip? Why are they such an iconic band?
I have my reasons. You ask 10 hardcore Hip fans, what is it about the Hip? And you're probably going to get, a lot of different answers, a lot of similar answers. A lot of it has to do with their penchant for singing about Canadian history in ways that we were never taught as Canadians growing up. Sometimes having to do with Indigenous issues. None of the boys are Indigenous, but this is something that Gord Downie believed in. And it's funny because there are pockets in the U.S. where the Hip do really, really well. Yeah, you mentioned, along the border. They do well in Cleveland. They do well in Chicago. They do great in Texas. They do, in L.A., a lot of transplanted Canadians, though, I think. But it was really neat to see them in Rome, New York for Woodstock 99. I think it was a Sunday morning, early Sunday afternoon. And this is the thing, when you go see the Hip in the U.S., as soon as they hit the stage, you'll see Canadian flags go up. The boys didn't really like that. They were trying to make a name for themselves and trying to spread their music. And they don't need to be reminded that they're Canadian. Yeah, you're not going to take away from that proud Canadian who's sitting there and saying, "This is my band, man." And, up goes the Canadian flag. But I think that also alienated them in a lot of ways in the U.S. Is that such a strong, fervent, a lot of people compare Gord Downie to Michael Stipe, but when you see REM anywhere in the world, you don't see American flags go up. You know what I mean? So I think that turned off some Americans. Also, I think, there was, lot of Canadian references. There's also a lot of American references to the Hip's music. So I wouldn't necessarily cite that. Gord Downie was just a sponge wherever he toured. He soaked up everything. And but as far as what turns me on about the Hip, I just love that chemistry of these 5 guys who grew up together in grade school or high school and then starting a band and it never changing. Since that first EP, and I just love that sound. Gord is like an amusement park. Going to see him live, it's so entertaining. No 2 Hip shows are the same. Paul Langlois and Rob Baker's guitars, I love that crunch. I love Gord Sinclair's bass playing. I love Johnny Faye's drumming. It's just these five guys together. I've taken my ex-wife from Nashville. I took her to see the Hip. This would have been 2002. My ex-wife now. She moved to Toronto. She had a record deal with Mercury Polygram years ago.
As you write about in the book.
Do I write about Rana? I guess I do. Yeah. But I took her to see the Hip one time. And she was standing around, poor girl, looking around, seeing like 20,000 fans ballistic. This was in Toronto at a huge outdoor theater on the water. And she's looking around going, I don't get it. What's happening here? And I said, it's a Canadian thing. I don't know. She goes, it's just a really good sounding bar band, though. And I said, on the surface, maybe that's how you could accurately describe them to an outsider. But once you get into the music and once you figured out your 10 favorite songs and then those change a year later to another 10 favorite songs, it's really addictive. And again, watching Gord Downie it's unbelievable. And I miss him, and I know the boys miss him. And I was thinking about Gord just today, the other day, on my drive home from work. Just thinking, wow, I miss hearing word of a new Hip record and getting excited for it, and getting excited to see them again. Yeah, I was just thinking that today.
You mentioned driving home from your job. Your career has taken some turns since you left Much Music and Much More Music. Local TV in Edmonton, then Ottawa, then Kingston, and then radio, and now out of media altogether. There are people, and you have probably met them and heard from them, who would think that after this life in the public eye, that anything beside that would be kind of a bring down. And yet, like the title of your book is The Happy Has-Been. You seem perfectly content with this being in your past and still being a part of your life. But frankly, like, how did you get to the point where you feel good about doing things for your own esteem and not necessarily for the esteem of others?
Very well said. Man, you are good. I left Much Music on my own. I was just done with the way entertainment and Much More Music was being presented. And so, I got an offer to go to Edmonton to do local television and host a morning show. And I thought, great, never done that before. I'll do it. It's just a matter of finding something that excited me within the realm of broadcasting and media. When I missed Ontario, Edmonton is in Alberta, I got a job offer to come to Ottawa. Okay, well, it's not Toronto. I really miss Toronto and my friends and family, but it's at least Ontario. And then went to Ottawa, and then there was major cuts, and we've all seen the cuts through newspaper and radio and TV the past 10, 15 years. So I was affected by that. Got a nice gig in Kingston with a heritage TV station that's been around close to 70 years. And, they were an affiliate here of a big broadcaster in Canada, a national broadcaster. Really fell in love with. Moved here for the job, fell in love with the city and the people and the energy. And then, there were cuts just as of last year. To our radio and TV interests. And I thought, I think I have PTSD from working in broadcasting. It's been very, very good to me for just over 35 years. But I don't think I ever want to work in broadcasting in that capacity ever again. And so, I'm working at a car dealership. I know that sounds weird. It's a high-end car dealership, and it's very renowned in Eastern Ontario. A friend of mine works there, and he goes, have you ever thought of sales? And I thought, not really, no. He goes, well, you interview people. That's all you do as a car salesman. You find out what they need, what they're looking for. And I said, I'm that guy who wears that cheesy suit saying, come on down, I got a deal for you. Hey, smoking a cigar. He goes, we don't want that. We're not about that. And don't think of yourself in sales. Think of yourself as being in a service. I thought about it. I go, I'm servicing. Helping them make a big decision, talking them through it, giving them options, and in the end, hopefully at the end of the day, seeing them smile and happy with the decision they made. And so is it broadcasting? God, no. But is it the same sort of maybe disciplines in interviewing someone? Hell yeah. And so, I've only been doing it for like 3 months, and I'm loving it. It's weird getting into sales. And it's weird leaving broadcasting, but I consider myself sort of retired now, and so I'm doing this on the side.
Do you get anybody? Have you had anybody like give you a double take when they've come in to look at a car and think, do I know this guy from somewhere?
There's been some of that. There's been a lot of, I hear you're again, Chev. How are you finding it? There's a lot of, do you miss TV? There's a little bit of everything, and a lot of anger towards the broadcaster that decided to that I used to work for, that decided to make cuts across Canada, and Kingston, unfortunately, was one of the cities where major cuts were made. And so a lot of anger towards them. I can't be angry. It was a business decision. I know it's not personal. Everyone lost their job. If it was just me, I think I'd take it personally. But no, it was sadly a pattern of things that we've seen in the past 10 years, and a sign of things to come with every broadcaster. There's only so many commercials, only so many clients, only so much sponsorships to go around. A lot of that is being eaten up by social media. So TV will always be there, radio will always be there, maybe just not in the vast amount of numbers that we've grown up with.
Today, when you go to a concert in Kingston or Toronto or whatever, you can go as just a fan.
I've always done that, though. And I've never had a problem with anyone that wants to come up and say hi or ask a question or take a picture. I'm not comparing myself to Paul McCartney by any stretch of the imagination, but I heard Paul once say, the only thing worse than being recognized and being bugged is not being recognized. Meaning, if you put yourself in the public eye, I think it's your responsibility to carry that with grace and dignity. And we're talking about the local weatherman. We're talking about broadcaster and newscaster on CNN. If people recognize you, always leave a good impression, and that's what I've always done. And I was seeing The Cure and Robert Smith in Toronto a couple summers ago, and people stopped to take a picture and wanted to talk and commented on a Cure special that I did like 12, 13 years previous. That blew my mind. I love that.
You talk about hanging out with your friends at the pub, and they're trying to stump you is probably the wrong word, but find somebody that you haven't interviewed. So what would be the winner? Who's the one artist that I could mention that you always wanted to interview, but you've never gotten to?
I've interviewed every single one of my idols, sometimes 2 or 3 times, sometimes spent a couple days with Ozzy. I grew up with having an Ozzy patch on my back. I had Led Zeppelin patches on my jean jacket in high school, and I've interviewed every single one of the remaining members of Led Zeppelin and Jason Bonham. But Paul McCartney, I've interviewed Ringo Starr, I've interviewed Julian Lennon, Sean Lennon, I've interviewed Yoko Ono. I've never interviewed Paul McCartney. I've interviewed Ringo Starr. I've interviewed Pete Best. Never Paul McCartney. That would be a dream. And probably Lady Gaga, maybe. Never interviewed her. Would love to.
Well, if either Sir Paul or Lady Gaga is listening to this, they should call either one of us, because
Wouldn't that be weird? Yeah. What are they doing watching?
Yeah.
Yes.
Willis and Bill Welychka, it's been a real delight and an honor to get to know you a little bit. And thank you so much for making the time.
Oh, my God. My pleasure. It really has been. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and I can see why you love what you do, because you do it so well. Way to go. Keep it up.
Bill Welychka, former Much Music VJ, former local TV person in Edmonton, Ottawa, and Kingston, former local radio person in Kingston, and as you heard, now in the automotive industry, working.
And an author.
And an author of The Happy Has-Been, his memoir, and just a really interesting guy to talk to. It was really kind of a delight getting to know him, and the guy is a little, I don't know, Forrest Gump-like in the sense that, he kind of went everywhere and did everything in this one period of music. I'm not sure if anybody's ever actually compared him to Forrest Gump, but...
He also told Lyndon B. Johnson, I really gotta pee.
Ethan, before we heard the interview, you were asking me my favorite music video. But before I say, what is your all-time favorite music video?
Oh, my all-time favorite music video. You know, when I asked you that, I wasn't prepared to answer myself.
Do we have to listen to the interview again?
No. I really like the music video for A Favorite House Atlantic by Coheed and Cambria. I really like the music video for Pain by Jimmy Eat World. And there's, what's the third one I'm thinking of? What is the name of it? I can't think of the other thing. It's fine. It's fine. Let's just move on. What's yours?
Mine is probably a more recent song. It's by a German hip-hop artist named Fiva, whose real name is Nina Sonnenberg, and a song called Frühling, which means spring, and it's shot in black and white, and it juxtaposes. She's got a whole big band orchestra that's playing with her, and it's just I think from a cinematic standpoint, it goes so nicely with the song that I just love watching it. I'm just as apt to watch and listen as I am to just listen to the song. Cool.
I love that. I really like making music videos too. It's a lot of fun. As a musician, it's like an afterthought because it comes after you've already done the hard work of making a record. And then it's just like, oh, this is the fun part. This is where we get to be goofy and whatever. A couple years ago, my band filmed a music video in my house for a song that we wrote that I can't say the name of because it has a swear. I'll just say it. I'll censor it. It's called Crypt. And my bass player had this idea that we should ape an episode of Goosebumps. You remember Goosebumps? So there's a Goosebumps episode about a haunted camera where whenever someone got their picture taken by this camera, the subject would die or get into a horrific accident.
It's a very similar episode of The Twilight Zone.
Is there probably?
1964.
Okay, yeah.
Except it was a mirror.
Oh, okay. Well, and now, so from The Twilight Zone to Goosebumps to now a music video by the band Sunflower. So our singer is a very avid photographer, takes great photos, takes album artwork for people. And our bass player was like, well, our singer takes photos. We could have him take Polaroids of us. And every time he takes a Polaroid, one of us gets hurt. Which was a lot of fun, except for the twist for me, it was that when Jeff took my photo, suddenly I went from being bald to having a lush head of hair. So I performed the rest of the music video with a giant long wig, which is a lot of fun.
We were talking about this before the interview as well. I mean, there is something nice about the kind of the democratization of music videos that you don't have the entry point. You don't have to have a $2 million budget to make them. Yeah. But again, the downside is the fire hose and having to go and the algorithm on, say, YouTube might be useful in the sense that it could expose you to music videos you like based on the music videos you've just watched. But still, it's different than turning on MTV or Much Music or whatever and having a human being say, this video by Flock of Seagulls you were going to love.
Yeah, right. And
because they're all wearing aluminum foil.
There's definitely something to be said for what does Ian Malcolm say in Jurassic Park? You're too busy focused on whether or not you could than whether or not you should. I don't know.
Yeah. No, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. He didn't say it in those words. But.
We should start gatekeeping musicians more. If you're not good, stay out. Don't make bad music videos.
All right. So write your complaint letters to NCPR, care of Ethan Shanty. Ethan Shanty is our producer. He joins us at the beginning and end of our Northwards episodes. Ethan, tell us who else is responsible for this fine programming.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, produced, and edited by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. You can find more conversations and support this show at ncpr.org/northwards. This is NCPR North Country Public Radio.